So today my talk is titled Design Principles for Dashboards. I work in analytics in our data team and subdiscipline of product analytics, supporting both product teams and our marketing teams. And with it, at Monzo, we use Looker as our dashboard and visualization tool, so everyone who joins the company gets at least viewing access. And we really encourage everyone in the company to be visualizing the metrics that are important to them and using data for insights. So my ideas and thoughts are some thoughts I put together before I joined Monzo, but I'll also share with you how we've implemented some of those within the company. Cool, so I've been told I have 18 minutes. So I'll quickly go over dashboards as a tool, why we should care about dashboard design, and no matter what discipline you're in your role, you're probably exposed to or interacting with looking at dashboards and data visualizations. I'll quickly cover why this step can be easily overlooked, and then dig a little bit into the psychology of information retrieval. So just at a very high level, what happens when we're interpreting data that we see. And 12 practical tips that you can employ. So hopefully you can take these away, apply them to dashboards that you're creating or that you're using. And I'll hopefully have time to cover as well our approach at Monzo to creating amazing dashboards. Cool, so dashboards are the type of tools that we're using as analysts actually this should be our roles as analysts. So we're interpreting data, maybe it's in a raw format, we need to make use of that data and come up with insights. Ultimately, we want to drive different actions within a business, change behavior, and be driving continual improvements within teams, the projects that they're working on, the strategies that they're creating. And our role is also to communicate those insights. So really key, it's great fun looking at data, but the key thing is sharing those insights with other people who are making key decisions in the business. So some of the tools that we know we use, PowerPoint and slides are super popular. You might be creating reports, maybe PDF reports, maybe using Jupyter notebooks for more in-depth analysis. You might be communicating by email or Slack, which we use as our main communication tool. And ultimately communicating face-to-face, which is always going to be the most effective way to share your insights and get feedback. Cool, and then within our tool set, as analysts, we have dashboards. So these, as we know, automatically update as self-service. We can build interactivity in them to help users explore data more. They ultimately help us scale our work and keep us sane as analysts. So if you can automate every piece of analysis that you've done, then for the next person, you don't have to do that work again. So some tools, Looker, as I mentioned, we use. Obviously, a lot of us in the room have experience with Google Data Studio, Tableau, Tableau, obviously, also used by a lot of people. Cool, but there are some signs that the dashboards that you're creating need some improvement. So yeah, these look pretty horrific. Hopefully no one has been presented with a dashboard like that. But some of these signs might be that you're seeing low engagement, or there are questions about what that data point means. Or maybe you're hearing someone referencing a data point, but actually they've interpreted it in the wrong way. Or no action is ever really taken off the back of that dashboard, and it's not clear what action you should take at all. So why it can be overlooked. So we're all very busy people, but in the typical journey of getting data from its raw, from its raw state into a powerful data visualization. So we might have a new data source. We need to understand what is the definition of that data, how is it collected. We'll work with teams to understand, well, what metrics even matter to you, what would what actions would you take if this number changed? We then integrate that into our business intelligence tool, maybe our data warehouse as well. And then we create the dashboard. We share it. We hope that we have engagement over time and that we improve them over time as well. So there are a lot of steps that we take, and depending on the setup, this will be faster or slower. But the key message here is that if we don't focus on the last 3 steps about creating and improving and iterating on our dashboards, to make them as effective as they can be, then all the hard work that's gone on before is kind of lost in a sense, or at least we're not maximizing the potential of what we've done previously. Cool, so onto a key concept in the psychology of information retrieval. So is this idea of pre-attentive processing versus conscious effort. And the idea, well, what it means is that first of all, we process information based on stimulus that we see on the page that stands out the most. And this is a subconscious process, so it happens very quickly. And then we select further areas for a more complete understanding of what's going on, what should we look at, what trends are we seeing. So to illustrate this in a couple of examples, so if I ask you how many 7s are on this page, and I give you a little bit of time to try and get the right answer. I like it, we see some squints in the audience. 8, cool.
8.
Nice. I should have taken some data points on how long that took, but cool, great job. And if I ask you that question again now, does it feel that little bit easier to answer that question? There are 8, yeah, you're right. Cool, and if I present you with this beautiful spaghetti graph, and I ask you, what am I trying to communicate to you? What is the message and the key takeaway that you should learn from this graph? Again, you have to put in a lot of effort to try and understand what you're supposed to be looking at. And if we look at this graph again, so with a few changes to color and a couple more labels, we can see that without understanding any context of what's going on, we're talking about health, something in health, maybe healthcare or the industry, and that since 2011, we've seen an upward trend in this metric. So I have no idea about the context or I guess, the background of this data, but quite quickly I can gauge a key insight from the visualization. So the main point here is that when we think about pre-attentive processing and this subconscious process that goes on, we can work with pre-attentive attributes. So things like color, shape, size, spatial grouping, and we can use them to our advantage to make it as easy as possible for the end user to understand what they're looking at. Cool, so a summary is that properties can be harnessed to make it easier for a user to understand what's presented through the design and save them from consciously processing all the data presented in short-term memory, which requires a lot more effort. And ultimately, if someone feels like it's a really big effort to try and understand what you want to communicate, then they're less likely to engage with that dashboard or data visualization going forwards. So to give a framework to the 12 tips that I have, they cover 4 design principles which come from the area of product design. So the first one is affordance, and this is around making it clear how a product should be used, but in this case it's how a dashboard should be used. The second is accessibility, so people with a range of abilities and knowledge should be able to use your product, the dashboard. The third is aesthetics, so beautiful designs are easier to use and tend to be more readily accepted as well. And finally, acceptance, so what you're creating needs to be accepted by the end user. So typically, we're not designing dashboards for ourselves. We might be, but most of the time, it's for another intended audience. So yeah, getting buy-in from them. So I have 3 tips that you can use to kind of improve in these areas. So the first one around affordance and making it really clear what the purpose is defining your dashboard's purpose and also the target audience. So really writing these down, agreeing them with whoever you're creating the dashboard for, and really understanding what are the objectives of that user or audience. So what do they need to learn? Is it that they want to know how we're performing against business plan, or is it that they want to understand what paid campaigns are performing well to take an action and change how we're bidding or change some creative that we want to update in our ad platform. So writing these down is a really good way to understand the problem you're trying to solve and also to protect against scope creep. So this is when you have a dashboard and people are asking for loads of extra things to be added, and actually if you refer back to what the purpose of this was, it becomes a lot easier to say, well, actually we need to create a separate way or a separate dashboard or solution for this different audience and this different use case. So tip 2 is to put it on your dashboard, writing out the purpose and audience in your title and subtitle. So really simple, but it means that whoever is opening that dashboard immediately understands who this is supposed to be for and what they're supposed to learn from it. So making it easy, again, for people to figure out how they should be using this dashboard, making it super obvious. And then the third is around telling me a story. So visually, we read from left to right and down the page. So this is something we can exploit or think about when we're planning out the layout of our dashboards. But we have our objective or purpose. We understand the audience that this is for. So again, using post-it notes, you might want to discuss, okay, what are the questions that we want to answer? So this, is an example, again, for like paid ads, but how much did we spend last month? Maybe you want to know, again, like, was that above or below what we expected? What's our spend per new user? How many new users did we acquire? What percentage of all users is this contributing to? And then breaking it down into more detail, so making sure that you're answering the key questions at the top, and then in a sense preempting what the next question is that your key audience might be looking at or asking. So adding some segmentation or some graphs to show the trends as well over time. Cool, on to accessibility. So the second design principle. So this is making it really easy for people who aren't in maybe your team or don't know about your area to open that dashboard and again, understand what they're looking at. So tip 4, no acronyms, using full words. I think, we have a words team at Monzo, which is incredible because they look at how we communicate to customers, but also internally. And acronyms, I guess, within a very small specialized group are there to speed up communication in a sense, but to a wider group or people who don't understand that acronym, it basically results in confusion, clarification being needed. You may as well write it out in full so that someone doesn't have to come over to you and ask you what it means. Avoiding acronyms in all cases. Tip 5 is making the most of notes. So not being afraid to really specify in your dashboard and give the user extra information if they need it. Maybe how that metric is defined, how the data was collected. This is also really important to remove ambiguity. And the final one, so again, it's just a tip, maybe not for everyone, but to use questions as titles. So for example, instead of writing number of registrations per week, it might be how many people registered last week as the title of your chart. And this is because people are coming to dashboards to answer questions. So it helps them understand what they should be learning from that visualization. Cool, an example, this is from Data Studio, one of their templates, but I think it illustrates a couple of those suggestions quite nicely. So so questions as titles. So here it says, did they remember seeing the ad? Did the ads change how they feel about the brand? Which ads drove the greatest response? And even though this is measured with a response index calculated as share of searches over share of impressions, the user just wants to know, what question are you helping me answer? They don't necessarily need to go into the details, but then the details are there if they're needed. So notes are being used to remove ambiguity next to the data visualization and also in the notes. So in the notes, it will say how this survey data was collected, the number of respondents, things that are also very important for the interpretation. And then the final thing in terms of the layout of this, and back to telling a story, is that this dashboard uses a known framework, see, think, do, going from consideration to conversion. And by using a known framework as well, that will help that end users saying this is a marketing dashboard to relate to what you're showing them. So some nice examples of that here. Cool. So those are ones that cover accessibility. So the third design principle was around aesthetics. So beautiful designs being easier to use, more readily accepted. And this is about really thinking what graph or data visualization is going to communicate what you need to show in the most effective way. This, I think, is really old, or 2006. So there's probably an opportunity for one of us to create an updated version. But really think about what are you showing. Is it a distribution? Is it a relationship between two variables? And a scatter chart might be a good choice. Is it a bar chart? And maybe testing some of those things out as well and getting feedback. So you might be using a line graph to track trends, maybe a bar chart to monitor year-on-year differences if you've decided that that's the most important thing that you want to communicate. What is our growth year-on-year, for example? And also considering readability. So again, really simple things, but orientation, spacing, ordering of data points. So making it as easy as possible for people to get what they need, so they don't have to turn their head 90 degrees to figure out what they're looking at. And then number 8 is around aesthetics and colors. So choosing your colors wisely, but a lot of these data visualization tools have default colors. So Google Data Studio, I think it's probably Google's colors, and they're not always the best colors for you to be using. So as we've seen with the spaghetti chart, we can use color to really accentuate what we're focusing the user's eye on. And there's a whole world around color theory and strategy, which you can read more about. But it's a good idea to keep colors simple and professional. If you want them to be aligned to your brand, working with your design team to expand the color palette that you have, making sure that it is suitable for data visualizations and charts. And you don't need to be a great designer to come up with really good really good color schemes. So this is a pretty cool website, coolers.io. Have I put? Yeah, coolers.io. You press spacebar and then it does all the magic for you. So again, you can save maybe some of these as templates in your tool, test out some different colors. And these are just some other examples. So Color Brewer, which also has the option to choose colorblind friendly palettes, and one by Adobe as well. So things to think about, especially colorblind friendliness in terms of accessibility. And then around aesthetics is a key point about white space. So making sure not to clutter your dashboards with too many visualizations. I think Looker starts to get angry at you when you put more than 20 tiles on a page, something like this. But space can be really helpful, again, to focus attention, to make sure that users aren't overwhelmed and they're really clear about what they should be focusing on. So yeah, keeping it simple. This is an example from Tableau with obviously a lot on that page, on the first page, going on needing to scroll right and left to see the full data visualization to a much more simplified version. And even more of an extreme example, but if there's only one thing that the user needs to learn from and take action on, then maybe just show that one thing. Just really think about what's the minimum that you need to show to drive the actions and share the insights that you want to share. And the final design principle, acceptance. So this is really important, and the best way to do it is in person rather than pinging over a link saying, hey, I've got this new dashboard for you. So really walking through the dashboard with that person, checking their understanding, asking for feedback, and then taking on board those iterations which you might want to make. So yeah, Grant spoke about treating data as a product, and in a way some of these tips like defining your purpose and audience are things that product managers are doing anyway when they define user stories and user needs. In this case, if you're replacing an old dashboard, maybe you want to show the old and the new side by side, walk the person through the changes. Like people can, I think, feel if they're used to something, that can be a difficult transition to make. So you need to make it as smooth as possible for people that you're working with. And then finally is reviewing over time. So you might want to set a check-in date to get additional feedback, make sure that the dashboard is still fulfilling that purpose. You might want to monitor usage of reports. So weekly active users, if you have that as a metric, would be amazing. But understanding how often these dashboards are being used and the frequency, to make sure that they're still fulfilling the original objective. So in Google Data Studio, you can add in a Google Analytics tracking ID and monitor usage of specific pages and reports on Google Analytics. Looker now has a way to view at least if dashboards were viewed by users. I'm sure Tableau has something similar. And then tip number 12 is kind of actually related probably to accessibility in a way, but is around content management and helping me find that dashboard again. So it might be that you create a sort of table of content, or that you, in your training around the business on how to use these tools, you make sure people understand how to favorite the dashboard, how to save it as a bookmark, how to have it scheduled to them on a regular basis, or even better, it being triggered when a certain threshold is met to set up alerts. So those are the summary of the 12 tips. So affordance, making it clear how the dashboard should be used, defining your purpose and audience, updating the title, telling the story throughout the layout using a known framework if that's possible. The second is accessibility, so making sure that you don't need to be a domain expert to access that data and insights. So avoiding acronyms, maybe using questions as titles, using notes effectively when things aren't clear. And then around aesthetics, choosing your charts, colors and branding, keeping things simple with white space. And then very importantly, acceptance, so introducing the dashboard, getting feedback, content management. So if we have a couple of minutes left, yeah, timing? Okay, cool, I'll rush through these then. So what we've done as a project at Monzo in the last couple of months is create the Monzo dashboard homepage. But this is basically the page that everyone who has access to Looker will see as their main page. And we came across a lot of similar issues that have been discussed. We have a lot of dashboards throughout the business. And we wanted a way to point people in the right direction. So if you want to find out about the savings team or new projects that we're working on, you can use this as your guide, essentially. And within this, we have agreed certain standards within the data team that any new dashboard added to this will have been peer-reviewed, essentially, within the analyst team. So kind of kept this in a raw format, so it's a lot of text. But we had this project which was how can we enable self-service but allow for users to find core dashboards and minimize repetition. And we have this great use of proposals at Monzo. So you create a proposal, people give their input, you find a team to execute it. So this proposal was to create a curated space on user, owned and maintained by the wider data team. And what did this mean? So that everything had a consistent look and feel, so basically taking into account the tips and best practices, which I've just shared with you. And then it also had some thoughts around discovery, so how do we navigate between dashboards? How do we make sure that there's a structure of what's called spaces in Looker, which is how you save, where you save your dashboards? Do we have consistent naming conventions, etc.? And then so consistent look and feel, discovery, and then the third one was around KPI definition. So some thoughts that we put together around, okay, KPIs should be measured week on week or have some concept of trajectory. It should be something that the team can change or drive action from. And each dashboard should have an owner, so who do you contact if you have questions? So we kind of pooled all of our ideas together about how to improve our current structure. And again, this looks a bit overwhelming, but came up with these aims and what this means. So around look, we want, consistent look and feel, no redundant information. So you should learn a new thing from each chart. Title and subtitle on every dashboard. No acronyms, everything has an owner. We've deleted older versions that maybe existed. So again, it's just like good, I guess, hygiene factor of what we're creating. So it's very difficult to keep track of everything, but at least we can, of all the dashboards being created, because it's great, many people create dashboards within the company, but we can maintain ones that we know are really important to us, to the standards that we've agreed in the team. Cool, so that's it. Psychology of information retrieval, design principles, just generally making sure your teams are coached in effective dashboard design to maximize engagement and productivity. And if you want to read more, there's this amazing book, Storytelling with Data, by ex-people analytics analyst at Google. She has some amazing thoughts about storytelling with data in general. It's not dashboard specific, but I would highly recommend. Cool, any questions?